Hey everybody, my name is Chris Whitesides. I work for California State University Northridge Associated Students Outdoor Adventure Program. And throughout this entire pandemic, we have been trying to find different ways of scratching our need for travel, for outdoors, for new experiences, and learning about the world around us. And we've kind of settled on doing Google Earth virtual tours to scratch that itch. So we'll be all in Zoom and in Zoom webinar, where you can't turn on your camera or microphone, but you can interact via the chat, like we said, if you have tech questions, and the Q&A somewhere else down there. Same disclaimer, far from a professional, never lived in Japan, I've just traveled twice and spent a whopping 6 days in Kyoto and some time on Wikipedia, but still happy to share my experience as you prepare for your own trip. Or maybe it's a walk down nostalgia lane, remembering a previous trip that you took. Last piece with Zoom, we've got transcripts on for anyone that needs them, but you're more than welcome to hide those transcripts with that main control bar down low. And with that being said, I think we are ready to jump into Google Earth as we use it to zoom around and pretend like we have flown 12 hours for folks like me in Los Angeles. Going from LAX to Japan, Tokyo in particular, is about a 12-hour flight to get to the beautiful country of Japan, which is a country in East Asia. Surprise. Good thing I had my notes for that. It's a country in East Asia that's comprised of a whole bunch of different islands. When I say a whole bunch, what I actually mean is 7,000 islands, if we count anything that's at least 100 square meters. So 7,000 islands, about 430 of those islands are inhabited and populated with a whole bunch of people in those 430 islands. The population of Japan is about 126 million human beings in this relatively small nation off the coast of continental Asia, the Sea of Japan, and all that. There are 4 primary islands that make up where the majority of those folks are and how the country is kind of split up and divided, being Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. With all these words, I am super sorry, but I am going to butcher a whole bunch of pronunciations, from Buddhist temple names to Shinto shrines to city names. There are so many. I'm going to do my best, but do go back and do your own research on things that I either messed up or points of interest that you want to learn more about. Like I said, the population of Japan is super dense, in part because about 3/4 of the entire country is mountainous, forested, and almost at a latitude similar to California with some of the temperate forests and continental forests that are going on. But because of that, a lot of the population centers throughout the country are clustered along the coast, including our biggest population center, that is Greater Tokyo. But everyone goes there. That gets a lot of press. We're going to be exploring this second massive spike in population, which is another large metropolitan area made up of different cities like Osaka, Kobe, and Kyoto, where we're going to go. What else about Japan? It is the 3rd largest economy in the entire world, just behind the US and China. And it's really cool geologically, which I always add these to these tours. I think it's super interesting, but Japan is often in the news for a lot of their natural occurrences that go on, whether it's volcanoes, tsunamis, a lot of environmental disasters, unfortunately to say. But the same reason for those environmental disasters also give it really amazing geologic features going on, like Mount Fuji. And that's because the entire island is situated between a whole handful of tectonic plates going on under the ocean, under the surface. And the way those plates move or subvert, no, what's the word I'm looking for? Subduct, go underneath each other, creates those mountainous regions, creates active volcanoes like Mount Fuji, and gives Japan so much of its shape and form that we're going to see as we jump into it. Let's hurry up and actually jump into it. Like we said earlier, the majority of your international travel for pension pennies, pinching pennies and trying to get to the cheapest airfare from California, from the US, probably will have you flying into Tokyo. This massive urban center and the largest city or the largest urban center on the planet as of 2016. Yeah, and as of 2022. The population of that greater Tokyo area being about 37.8 million inhabitants. 37.8. For comparison, the greater LA area, which greater LA is like 5 different counties: Ventura, San Bernardino, Orange County, LA County, Riverside. Regardless, LA, the greater LA area is only 18 million people. So Tokyo, Yokohama, that metropolitan sprawl is twice as big as that and massively dense too as well. But there are, because of that, there's 101 really cool things to see in the biggest city on the planet, including the Imperial Palace, where the emperor lived, other mashups, where you have this great blend of ancient, like imperial palaces that you can go see, and then these hyper futuristic districts like Akihabara, this major entertainment center of Tokyo. There's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on, from arcades to shops to robot shows to maid cafes to owl cafes to cat cafes. A lot of cafes going on in here. To these ancient, beautiful, ornate Shinto shrines and different temples that populate the entire country, like Sensoji, which I think is the name of this one. Again, there's so many. You got to keep them straight. Sensoji, yeah. Which this one in particular is a Shinto shrine. Shinto being the unofficial religion of the country of Japan, that we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But we need to leave Tokyo. You can go to another virtual tour to explore more around Tokyo, and you could spend an entire month, vacation, years in Tokyo exploring. But we're going to take a Shinkansen, a bullet train, to travel the 280 miles from Tokyo to Kyoto, which will take us about, I have that on here too, which will take us about 2 hours to go 280 miles, which is pretty wild. But we would have flown into Tokyo. All of these paths on the map represent different ways for us to take bullet trains, super efficient, super high-speed travel to get to different locales. Again, for reference, from Tokyo to Kyoto, 280 miles will take us about 2 hours by bullet train, and we'll be circling Mount Fuji right there in the middle during our entire trip. These are far from the only rail stations, railways throughout the country. There's massive, wonderful public transportation in the form of trains throughout the country, making it a really easy tourist destination to go to. There's a Japanese rail pass, or a JR rail pass, that's available for tourists at a flat rate, which gives you kind of free access to like 7 to 14 days of any train that you want to take at any time. It's really nice. They see you with a big backpack. They see you maybe not looking like everyone else. Hold up your little rail pass and you kind of get a free reign to play around. But we'll take that bullet train past Mount Fuji, again, that active volcano that's erupted or been active as of 300 years ago. But beautiful scenery as we travel over to another urban sprawl and set, which is Kyoto. And we picked Kyoto for this virtual tour as we actually get into it, because I think it gets away from that hyper urban or massive urban sprawl that is Tokyo, but still does a really good job of representing this niche, unique, super specialized blend of history and future, of past and present, which in some of the places around the US that I've traveled to, I've never seen that wonderful hybrid, that wonderful mix of the new and the old, and respect to the old while pushing the boundaries of the new. So wherever you go in Kyoto, it seems like you're always a stone's throw away from a 1,200-year-old Buddhist temple complex, or just down the street from a brand new shopping center or outdoor market. Again, there's a Shinto shrine that's literally 800 years old, survived wars and famine and fire. And then, It's just this amazing kind of feel to have that. And we'll try and capture that as we explore the ancient and the new through this super simplified infograph. But Kyoto is really tidy in that it's on a nice, whatever that is, square structure grid outline. And it's accessible via train and via bike a lot to get from one side of the other. But a lot of these places, not a great map, Chris, a lot of these places that we're going to see are kind of hugging that outside rim, which is a more mountainous area with the flat city below. And having two rivers that run through too just kind of increases or forces the nature to be in this area. And Kyoto as a city is, like I was saying, an ancient city with a whole lot of history. If we zoom out, we can see that it was more so in the heart of Japan, maybe, than Tokyo geographically. By 1794, people were established, and probably earlier than that. But in 1794, there were agrarian farmers set up in this kind of big Kyoto Valley in this region, still relatively close to the coast with waterways giving us access there. But by 1794, Kyoto was established as the capital of Japan. And let's zoom out a little bit more to see our neighboring spots. 1794, Kyoto is established as the capital of Japan and home to the emperor. Their previous or historic systems of government, including emperors and including shoguns. By the 1100s, Buddhism has kind of seeped into the culture of Japan from the ancient kind of Shinto practices that go down, and now into this new Buddhist waves that are coming, creating this unique kind of blend, again, not only of ancient and new, but even the ancient has different sects and histories between the two. By between 1300 and 1600, wars, famine, fires, kind of not a great time for Japan in this period, with just a lot of general unrest. And that's important to denote those dates of 1300 to 1600 and some of those fires, because so many of these old historic cities were built up of wood, and a lot of those fires destroyed some of those old buildings. So many that we see are reconstructions or have been moved or rebuilt in the same form, but may not be the exact 1200-year-old building that we might think it might be. By 1600 to 1850, Japan closes the Edo period and sees a wave of kind of westernizing culture. Again, lending just one more layer onto this amazing cultural milieu that is Kyoto and is Japan in general. And part of that, really the foundation of where that's at, if we go back to those agrarian cultures, are these Shinto shrines, which again, the unofficial air quote religion of Japan, because it's probably not a religion like we think of it, in that formalized or doctrinal with a book like the Bible or a central figure of authority like the Pope. Two very Christian examples. But Shintoism was regional, was very diverse in where it was practiced and how it was practiced. But throughout the city, dotted within those big temples, are also these really small, really beautiful Shinto shrines, many of which are denoted to a kami, or a god or a spirit. That's K-A-M-I to look it up. A god or a spirit. And then with different practices, whether those are talismans, amulets, and totems, Torii Gates protecting or marking the entrance to these sacred spaces. These Shinto shrines are everywhere. And they're amazing to stumble on as you're walking around the city and not even expecting this beautiful garden with a purification trough for you to wash your hands and mouth before entering in to perform a series of rituals, depending on what the shrine is, whether those are donations, clapping, bowing, going to ceremonies, dances. They're just really otherworldly in the way they're designed, all the different items that kind of litter or almost feel like they clog it up, but it's all part of it. Wishing boards where you can buy a wooden totem and carve on a wish. pieces of paper with your fortune on it, where you leave behind bad fortune. The practices are just as diverse as so too are the shrines as you go from place to place. But no shrine is bigger or probably more famous than the Fushimi Inari shrine, which is home to 1,000 Torii Gates. And it was really hard to capture a Google Earth image or pick a Google Earth image that captured those thousands of Torii Gates, but we can kind of see it in here. Where literally 1,000, I think there's got to be more than 1,000 of these gates mark paths that go all the way up and down these mountains with various sites along the way, whether they're graveyards, shrines, little shops, but they go all the way to the top of this mountain. And it's an amazing way of hiking that's unlike kind of anything else I've ever done, to say the least. But this Inari was a kami of the god of rice and kind of plenty. And Inari have foxes that were messengers. So the entire mountain is home to Torii Gates and these fox shrines as they overlook everything. But then just to try and get a little scope, all up in these trees are those rows and rows of Torii Gates that you walk through. Big wooden structures painted bright orange and crazy well upkept too for having 1,000 of them. But paths crisscross all the way up to the summit of the mountain. Sweeping, massive, like 280 meters tall too. So what is that? About 1,000 feet tall of the mountain. So a really surreal place to go hiking that, again, unlike anything else I've ever done. But apart from those Shinto shrines or Shinto temples, like that Inari temple, we also have, let me triple check myself. Yeah, we have collections of Buddhist temples too. Like we said, during the Kamakura period, Buddhism started to seep into the area. And these massive temple complex, I think we saw this temple complex from Kyoto Tower, but overlooking that are these massive temple complexes with super ornate, beautiful, ancient or traditional Japanese architecture. And then inside these temples are just as ornate, just as elaborate shrines, but maybe not with the, I was expecting like bigger scope or higher vaulted ceilings, almost more intimate and smaller than some Western churches that we think about. But the attention to detail, immaculate, as we look around these wooden matted floors of ornate, decorative carved ceilings, of lanterns. And this is set up maybe for a festival or for a performance or a ritual that's going to take place. So very actively used by the population and the tourists that are all over the area, like myself, taking pictures. Another key or important, or I think unique Buddhist site is the, here's a name that I'm going to mess up, Ryozen Canon Temple. Please look that up on Wikipedia and have it pronounce it to you, which may look like an image or a depiction of the Buddha, but it's actually not. It's Canon, who is a bodhisattva, someone who achieved nirvana, but elected to stay behind the earthly realm to help others eliminate suffering and achieve nirvana themselves. This particular structure and image of Canon is the goddess of mercy and was built after World War II, honoring the fallen soldiers and citizens from both sides of the war. And it stands as a testament to the futility of conflict. So a unique element of kind of new Buddhism. And this was built after World War II, so relatively recent compared to 1400 years ago. But an amazing garden site to walk through and reflect at this reflecting pool at the Goddess of Mercy. We can jump back and forth from things with definitive religious connotations or spiritual connotations back to that rich history. And here we are at Niho Castle, which was that site, the capital of Japan back when the emperor lived here and also a shogun lived here. Shoguns are kind of cool, as they were appointed by the emperor to act as the military dictator. Wikipedia's words, not mine, but the military-based or focused ruler of Japan, and in times when Japan was more of a feudal system too. These castles had very definitive layers of protective boundaries and moats, kind of like castles we would think of in Europe. But then the castles themselves are back to these ornate wooden, beautiful buildings, and even more intricate inside are images like this, where sliding doors have those same matted floors and ornate painted ceilings, kind of showing the wealth, the importance of the people that would be here, including an image like this, which would be the shogun holding court. And I was just reading, he probably had bodyguards hiding in these sliding door cabinets besides him. Kind of that Edo period, Kamakura period illustration of what life might have looked like at court, or what those rituals and events may have looked like. In that Kamakura period, and in just one other temple, as we're in the Byodo-in temple, something we haven't seen or talked about, but that is samurai. With the rise of, I don't actually know if it was because of the rise of Buddhism or it just happened at the same time. But at the same time, in that Kamakura period, we see the rise of the samurai, which is initially an aristocratic warrior caste or group of citizens in that aristocracy that practiced kind of stoic, poetic, increasingly art forms of being a warrior. And so in this Buddhist temple, this may have been a place where samurai were either training or living or acting in the name of the shogun or under another ruler. Let's keep jumping around. There were so many temples. I know it's almost easy to get temple fatigue if that's not your scene. But again, each one was somehow more diverse or uniquer than the last. And that's in a series of literally hundreds of shrines and temples in just one city alone. They were all outdoors. They all had immaculate gardens and landscape. They also, again, had unique features to each one of them, as there's maybe different statues, different architecture, different pagodas or buildings there. So definitely worth just walking around. Nearly all of them were free to enter, although it was recommended, or spaces where you could leave an offering or a donation to continue that upkeep. But as soon as you were all done with your beautiful nature-based temples, shrines that are out there, you could switch it up and go hyper urban. And here, this entire stretch right here that almost looks like railroad tracks is the Nishiki Market, open during the day. At night, it had that kind of very small, very crowded, very populated, back to that dense, more urban experience, as traditional Japanese foods, wares are all being hawked and sold as this stretched on, like that earlier picture showed, for just miles of hyper urban city streets as you go to maybe get out of the sun, get away from, recharge from seeing 20 temples and the beauty of it all in the Nishiki Market. And we immediately go back into nature. This is a bamboo grove or bamboo forests. It's one of the most photographed places in Kyoto because of its uniqueness. There are not a ton of bamboo forests around. And this is also on the edge of one more, you guessed it, a shrine and a temple. But going on hikes and walk through nature are easy ways where you don't have to feel, and I often didn't feel, like if the urban density or just the mass of humanity, it never felt crazy crowded. Shoot, even compared to LA or going to Manhattan Beach, it feels way more crowded than a lot of these places did. Another nearby spot, which was probably pretty darn tourist of me, but well worth it, was a monkey park on top of that same mountain where that bamboo grove was, which gave some beautiful sweeping panoramas of the entire city and the surrounding areas. And it's called a monkey park because there are just monkeys cruising around. In this situation, you are in the cage, kind of a reverse zoo, where you could feed snacks. I don't remember if it was like cookies or it wasn't bananas. I would have remembered that. But you can feed the monkeys through these slats, take in the view. And it was, again, one more just beautiful hike past 2 or 3 shrines all the way up to the top to see this. That's a crazy quick overview of just some of the things that you can see in Kyoto. But another reason why I highly recommend this as our destination is because there are amazing destinations that are super accessible via that high-speed rail, via public transportation. And you are in this nice centralized area within Japan where you can jump to massive cities of Osaka, of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, even not super far away. But 2 of my favorite ones that we went to in this urban sprawl mess was Osaka and Osaka Castle and Aquarium, and Nara, which is a little off the beaten path comparatively, but well worth it, because in Nara and Deer Park, Nara is home to hundreds, thousands, maybe millions, who knows, of crazy tame deer. And this is not like you're not supposed to feed the wildlife situation, but it's actually kind of embedded in the identity of the city and the region, where you can buy these biscuits. They're sold all over the place. I think they were like $2 or $3 USD. They're kind of like wafers. I actually tried one. They weren't bad. Don't recommend it. But you can feed all the deer that are just walking around, standing around, which makes for a pretty unique experience as you again hike past this massive monument, this ancient shrine with deer, which vendors and stalls will be open during festivals. A really cool, another just place for affordable hiking. And then again, within earshot, within a stone's throw of just that last image, there are probably 7 temples, 7 pagodas, each more brilliant and more massive than the last. A really cool part and central part of all my trips was going to explore those. But again, you don't have to build your trip based around just temples and shrines like I typically did. You can see other incredible wonders of the world, UNESCO heritage sites, maybe not wonder of the world, but the Osaka Castle is another just reminder that of the history of this country and of these accessible places, which each photograph makes for a cooler one than the last. And each one of these has amazing history of feudal periods, of war, of peace times, the art, the poetry that goes along with, each more unique than the last. And again, you walk 30 more minutes from the 1,000-year-old castle and you're in a hyper-urban place. You've got shopping centers, you've got traditional, more touristy activities, ferry rides, bike rentals, shows, theme parks, amusement parks. I think of the biggest aquarium tank in the world, which houses a whale shark, which was really cool to go to. But places like Osaka, like Kyoto, or that combination, because they are all kind of combined, being 45 minutes away via rail from almost anything, kind of makes there will be, or I would hazard that there's something for darn near anyone that travels here. And I think that is the end of all my slides. And that is the end of our sprinting tour through Japan, little tiny bit of Tokyo, mainly Kyoto, and some of those spots for you to scribble down and do some more research and learn about. And then the surrounding area as we check out Nara, Osaka, Castle at Himji, yeah, and on and on and on. Thank you for hanging out with us. I appreciate you dropping by and spending some time. I hope you learned something about a new place, but more importantly, I hope I spurred an interest for you to do your own research, follow up on a story, a piece, a sector that was more interesting to you. And then when this whole COVID thing blows over and it's safe to do so, highly recommend traveling to Japan.